This is how I imagine fighting in my fictional scenarios, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. The movie starts in France during the height of World War II. After a bloody battle, the Nazi army penetrates an area of Paris. Then, a German soldier warns the civilians that those who hide more rebels will pay dearly. Nevertheless, the general halts the witch hunt, ordering the regrouping of his men due to the proximity of the enemy. Despite these orders, the colonel points out they must teach the French a lesson. What better than killing an entire family? Just before they pulled the trigger, a woman emerged from the crowd and assured the general that she knew nothing about the resistance. This generates a debate between the general and the colonel, although it doesn't last long because their enemies take them by surprise. Maybe I was hasty speaking in plural, as it's about one man, an American soldier who fights like an army. During his retreat, the colonel bids him farewell with the name Ryder, revealing that it is not the first time they have met. With lead and grenades, the protagonist makes his way to the Nazi camp, but a sudden bullet takes him down. I didn't see that coming. It seems that what he experienced was a dream that lasted too long, but he doesn't recognize the place where he is either. While exploring the place, he comes across a bag with a more than interesting content. A wallet without documents, a gun with special engravings, and the keys to a vehicle. Full of questions, the man approaches the motel receptionist, who informs him he registered under the name Ryder. That's how the colonel called him in his dream. The newly named Ryder finds himself outside with a spectacular motorcycle, which he soon discovers is his. With a past he cannot remember, the man begins to explore the city, one he doesn't know either. In that city is the Sanborn Group's headquarters, led by Mr. Sanborn, an elderly magnate, often with his assistant Jack. Curiously, both appeared in Ryder's dream. Sanborn was the general and Jack the German soldier interrogating civilians. Speaking of the dream, they are soon approached by Sauch, whom we knew as the evil colonel. Sauch presents himself as a reputed architect interested in Sanborn's megaproject, which involves completely remodeling the city. Although it was the project of his life, he has recently had doubts about it, as the inhabitants of the slums would be greatly affected. However, Sauch dispels his doubts, reminding him that he has a place in history to earn and cannot do so without sacrificing pieces in the process. Back with Ryder, he crosses a street that triggers a memory in his mind of a girl being kidnapped by a criminal gang. Once he comes out of his trance, the man enters a restaurant to have breakfast, where he encounters a very familiar waitress. She is the French woman from his dream. The woman, named Morgan, works at her grandmother Shelley's restaurant, a lady who is kind to Ryder. I was having a day like any other, until Jack and his men showed up, who came to collect the due rent from Sonnenberg. Ryder doesn't take his eyes off them, especially Jack, who prefers to leave without causing more of a scene. With his head a mess again, Ryder asks Shelley if she has heard of any girl recently kidnapped in the city. Since she doesn't seem to know anything, the protagonist leaves without even saying goodbye. As soon as he gets on his motorcycle, his mind transports him to the past. This time not to World War II, but to ancient Rome. Sanborn now appears as a senator who, influenced by Sue, orders the death of Morgan and her daughter. Fortunately, a gladiator comes to their defense, being none other than Ryder himself. Suddenly, the man returns to the past due to Jack and his men, who ask about his identity. What a coincidence that Ryder was going to ask them the same thing before they started fighting. Detective Timmons shows up to disperse Jack's gang. Timmons also has his reservations about Ryder, but Shell and Morgan support him. Additionally, they offer to host him. While showing him his new home, Morgan tells him that Jack works for Sanborn, who recently appeared in People magazine under the pseudonym of the Man with a Vision. According to Morgan, this vision is nothing more than making as much money as possible by harassing the locals to pay him. Every time he looks at Sanborn's face, Ryder is transported to his fictional memories, so he begins to wonder who that man really is. At the same time he heads to the Sanborn Group's headquarters, the protagonist fights a battle in ancient Rome, defeating a group of gladiators in defense of Morgan and her daughter. Thanks to his heroism, the people demand the pardon of the accused, and the senator complies. However, Sauch convinces him to send his best warrior so the show can go on. This is how Ryder duels against Jack and his men. Currently, the protagonist spots he leaving the building and soon realizes he also appears in his peculiar dreams. Back at the restaurant, the man discovers Morgan is a lawyer. Due to lack of money, she hasn't had the chance to practice her profession. In that moment, Morgan leaves the conversation due to a message from Roger Hammond, the most important councilman in the city. Intrigued, Ryder asks Shelley about that man. Morgan is part of his team of lawyers, with whom he intends to block the magnate's attempts to alter the city. When Shelley gets busy again, Ryder distracts himself with a newspaper in which he sees the announcement of a missing girl. Not far away, Osborne and his accomplices are thinking of a way to manipulate Hammond. Since his record is spotless, there is no possibility of blackmailing him. How do you bring down a man who already has everything easy? By taking away what he loves most in the world, and that is his daughter. At night, Ryder receives an unexpected call from Sauch, who knows he has been having strange dreams. He doesn't explain them either, just informs they have a game to play. Suddenly, the protagonist appears in 15th century England. In a tavern, the feudal Lord Sanborn, accompanied by his advisor Sauch, demands taxes from the poor Morgan, who has already given him everything she had. In the middle of the negotiation, a mysterious old woman confronts Sanborn, saying he still has time to do the right thing. Between what that lady says and his advisor, Sanborn doesn't know what to do. Currently, Ryder arrives at Detective Timmons' office with the missing girl notice. According to the detective, the case is solved. The girl just spent the night at a friend's and forgot to call her mom. The protagonist then notices his bulletin board full of photos and articles about Sanborn. Timmons warns him that asking about Sanborn there can be dangerous, so he's been secretly investigating and doesn't need help. Third-party city like Ryder. That night, during his shift at the restaurant bar, the protagonist is approached by Sue, who, setting aside his architect role, presents himself as a motivational speaker. Suddenly, Ryder finds him as the Nazi colonel, the friend of the Roman senator, and the advisor to the feudal lord. He is the snake that always telling Sanborn what to do, and after dropping that bomb, Sue leaves as if nothing happened. When touching the architect's card, Ryder returns to his memory of England, where he fights against Jack and his henchmen in defense of Morgan. Again, but each fight is more epic than the last. The only thing that brings him back to the present is Shelley's voice, telling him they've already closed. During all that time, he had been wandering in his mind. The next day, Jack, on Sage's orders, calls Ryder to offer him a job at the Sanborn Group. Upon learning of this, the magnate gets upset with Sage for his constant meddling in his business. Sauch, in response, asks him to watch the news where Hammond is, promising to defend the city from Sanborn's attacks. Furious, the old man takes it out on the model of his project and gives his accomplices the green light to do whatever is necessary. Later, the protagonist meets Jack for that alleged job, which is intercepting Annie Hammond's car, the councilman's daughter. Ryder plays along with the situation, and on his way back home, he finds himself once again in World War II. Returning to the initial scene, General Sanborn orders the retreat of his troops, although Colonel Sauch calls him a coward. Furious, the general guns down an innocent family and soon regrets what he did. In the midst of dreams and reality, Ryder encounters Sauch, who makes it clear to him that sometimes evil has to triumph for good to continue existing. Therefore, he invites him to stop fighting the inevitable and go with the flow of whatever is happening. And just as Sauch appeared, he vanishes as if nothing happened. At the restaurant, Ryder is not greeted by Shelley, but by Morgan, her granddaughter. She's covering her poker night. Lucky for them. Unfortunately, their moment is interrupted by Detective Timmons, who informs him that he checked his fingerprints in the system and found no matches. Ryder, essentially, is a ghost, and he doesn't like ghosts. He prefers to avoid the topic and continues with Morgan. I don't blame him. In their intimacy, she notices his collection of scars, memories of his past lives. While Morgan feels happy by his side, she can't help but wonder about his past. If only he could remember it. The next day, when Ryder meets Shelley, she shows him something he hadn't seen on the soul card. Backwards, it means chaos in English. He comes across a letter on his desk that seems from another era. In it, he reads the phrase, "It's never too late to do the right thing." It's the same thing the old woman in his dreams used to tell him, who was none other than Shelley. With this phrase hammering in his head, Sanborn finally realizes the mistake he has made or is about to make. He immediately orders Jackie and his team to scrap their plan. Under no circumstances does he intend to kidnap an innocent girl. However, absolutely no one obeys him, since from the beginning they have only listened to chaos. Later, little Annie leaves school and heads home. escorted by her father's guards. On the way, the van starts being chased by a couple of cars that lead it to an abandoned area where Zouch and his men, including Ryder, were waiting. Sanborn appears out of nowhere in a last attempt to stop the inevitable. But of course, it is inevitable. Jack opens fire on him and the escorts, ignoring the consequences that would have. In the end, the protagonist shoots Jack, allowing Annie to escape. On his deathbed, Jack remembers that they had done this before. From ancient Rome to World War II, fate has always pitted them against each other in an eternal battle where there can only be one winner. That is Ryder. The next on his list is Zouch, although he has run out of bullets. Zouch, on the other hand, does have an unexpected outcome for the Lord of Chaos. When the adrenaline wears off, Ryder realizes that he is injured and doesn't look good at all. Fortunately, fate smiles upon Ryder, granting him a miraculous recovery. Or so he thought, because he sees himself being mourned at his funeral. Officially, he is a ghost. Before continuing his fight against chaos, Ryder looks at his beloved Morgan one last time. She turns to look at him and smiles. And that's how this blockbuster ends. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and thanks for